Hello, I'm Pamela Field, and I'd like to talk to you today about the effects of inherited ancestral trauma. I'm referring to traumas that we have inherited from members of our matriarchal and our patriarchal lineages. In modern times, when someone suffers from a trauma, we have all kinds of support networks to help us work our way through and heal the suffering caused by that trauma. We have psychologists, psychiatrists, all kinds of different support groups, and all kinds of different alternative methods. In former times, the tendency was when someone suffered a trauma, the fact that there were not so many support systems or manners or techniques to help them overcome that, what one tended to do was to repress the trauma, push it down, bury it, and try to go on with life and living as best one could. In my opinion, when someone represses a trauma, what occurs is that the content, the emotional charge, the suffering from that trauma gets placed in what I refer to as a capsule. And within that capsule also is the effects of having repressed something. When anything is repressed, there are certain imbalances created in the body, and that also has a charge and an effect on the individual. So I'm referring to today traumas that we've inherited from ancestors that may be within us and causing all sorts of different kinds of distortions, limitations, restrictions, and also often producing physical disorders and illnesses. Now, there have been a lot of research done recently. A man by the name of Ken O'Brien, PhD, did a dissertation on the effects of post-traumatic stress disorder from veterans of the Vietnam War. And what he did was he studied the children and the grandchildren of men who served in Vietnam, and he discovered that many of these children were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. The dissertation is based on individuals who served in the war and who were clinically diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, his conclusions were that when someone is programmed to be in a constant state of alert, now this comes from obviously the men who served in the war, this can have positive effects in the sense of it protects and ensures the evolution or the survival of the species. But what happens is if somebody inherits this tendency to be always on red alert, and the factors that require that are no longer there, it causes a problem. And there you would have the effects of children nowadays who are diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, but perhaps what's really going on is they've inherited that tendency, that trauma that their father or grandfather suffered in the war, to be constantly on red alert, to be constantly hyper. Another study was done by a man named Nathan P.F. Kellerman, also a PhD, and his work was based on the transmission of Holocaust trauma from World War II. His conclusions state that a trauma may be passed on to subsequent generations in the same way that a hereditary disease may be passed on. Another very interesting study was done by Dr. Brian Diaz at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And what he did was his scientists programmed mice to have a fear. They instilled a fear in these mice of the smell of cherry blossoms. Then they allowed the mice to procreate. And the subsequent first and second generation of these mice were also born with the fear of cherry blossoms, the smell of cherry blossoms. What they also did was, through artificial insemination, they inseminated female mice that were not programmed with this fear, and they discovered that even those offspring were born with the fear of the smell of cherry blossoms. There is a doctor, there's a man called there's a man called Professor Marcus Pembry. He's a pediatric geneticist at the University College in London. And his conclusion, based on the study by Dr. Diaz, is that it offers compelling evidence of the biological transmission of memory. So I'd like to talk a little bit how these inherited ancestral traumas affect us. And in doing so, I'd like to use the example of something that I refer to as the victim tendency, the tendency to suffer. And in living in Spain, a lot of women that I've come across have this tendency here. Now I'd like to mention, in Spain was run by a dictatorship from the year 1939 to the year 1975. Spain suffered a horrendous civil war from 1936 to 1939. And during that war, the times were so difficult that basically the theme was, you have to suffer in order to survive. So you have women and families with 10 children, poverty, not enough food to feed the families, constantly working day and night physically to try and make ends meet. And you have women who have basically the program of those times is saying that to live is to suffer. Now, on the other hand, you have a tradition in Spain that when a husband dies, women dress in black, even to these times. It's a little bit less common now, but 10 years ago you would see often women, elderly women, wearing black clothing. And the idea was that once the husband dies, the woman, it's not very well viewed for her to enjoy life, to laugh, to have fun. Basically, the black clothing she wears for the rest of her life is an indication that she's suffering because her husband died. A combination of 1 or 2 or 3 generations of women under these conditions can produce a tendency that's passed on to a 3rd or 4th generation, to a woman in that lineage, where this woman is born almost programmed to suffer. Almost as if feeling the suffering makes them feel alive. So it's a program that's recorded within them that sometimes even goes beyond their lifetime, inherited. Now, other things that can be inherited are any number of depression, sensations or feelings of guilt, anger, injustice. Illnesses can be inherited, phobias. And what happens is all of these things limit. They don't allow us to live freely. They don't allow us to fulfill and realize and access the potential that's within us. They distort our reality. And they provoke these capsules within us, imbalances in the body, which can ultimately lead to physical illnesses and discomforts. Now, I've found that many people, many individuals in modern times are aware that they have these tendencies, that they've inherited these tendencies. They see themselves in action. They know when these tendencies are active. And they've worked very hard to heal themselves through all kinds of different therapies and books and information that's available to us. They've achieved and they've basically resolved their own issues from the traumas that they suffered in their lifetime. And what happens to these people is they see a period of advancement. They see that the tendencies become diluted, and they have the sensation that they are evolving, that they are improving. But sooner or later, what can happen is the tendencies reappear. The way I describe it is as if the people have a rubber band around their waist. And the rubber band allows them to go to a certain distance, and then it pulls them back to where they were. As if there's a barrier there they just can't get beyond. Now I would consider the effects of that rubber band as the inherited ancestral traumas that are still within them, still programmed within them. They've done and they've resolved their part of the story, of their issue, but these programs are still within them. And that is what does not allow them to achieve permanent healing. It's as if you're trying to resolve some problem in a computer by addressing the issues in the software, but perhaps the main problem is in the hardware, the genetics, the inherited ancestral traumas. Now, I'd like to talk for a moment because my approach is based on an energetic focus. And I'd like to talk a moment about the effects or the energetic aspects of the human body. Many ancient cultures are aware and were aware that the body is supported by all kinds of internal and external networks of energy that maintain balance in the body. These ancestral cultures realize that health and well-being is absolutely dependent on a state of balance and harmony in the human body. So we have traditional Chinese medicine that refers to something called meridians. And the meridians are invisible currents of energy that flow through the body and support the different systems and organs of the body. Basically, the organs and the systems of the body are dependent on the free and easy flow of energy through these currents that they call meridians. So if there's an imbalance in the meridians, an excess or a deficit of energy, or if the energy is blocked flowing through these meridians, it can cause a stagnation in the body, and it can ultimately affect or alter negatively the systems and the vital organs of the body. The traditional Chinese medicine also refers to something called dantians. Now, there are 3 dantians in the body. The lower dantian, which is responsible for the gravitational force and the gravity, the stability in the body. The middle dantian, in the area of the heart, is responsible for all the emotional functions and well-being of the body. And the upper dantian, in the area of the third eye, is focused on spiritual aspects of the human body. And these dantians allow the energy to flow through the body to different aspects and areas of the body. Now, the same thing occurs here. If there's a blockage or a deficit or an excess of energy in the dantians, the body once again is thrown out of balance. And this has a detrimental effect, physical effect, on the individual. Now, I'm sure you all are aware of the word chakra, which is a Sanskrit word. And the chakras also are 7 energy centers in the body that are connected to the spinal column, also have a connection to the nervous system, and they also regulate and are intimately connected to the vital organs and the well-being of the body. Deepak Chopra, Dr. Deepak Chopra, talks about Ayurvedic medicine, and he says if you were to look at an Ayurvedic chart, you would not see the organs and the typical images that you see in the book, the medicine reference book, the Gray's Anatomy. What you would see in an Ayurvedic chart is kind of a hidden diagram of where the mind is flowing in the body as it creates and balances the body. There's a flow of thought that goes throughout the body, and that is what Ayurvedic medicine treats. Ayurvedic medicine is not focused on the typical organs and system. It focuses on the flow of energy through the body. So, given this, a capsule containing a trauma occupies space in the body. And wherever that trauma is located, the other organs or muscles or physical aspects of the body have to accommodate or adjust to the physical space that energetic capsule occupies. So this does throw the body out of balance. These capsules throw the body out of balance. So I'm convinced, and I've been working for decades now, since 1992, with individual healing sessions and research and on the theme of the release of ancestral trauma. And my conclusions are, for an ancestral trauma and the tendencies or illnesses produced by them to be permanently resolved, or for the individual to see real significant measurable improvement, the energetic aspects of the capsule, everything contained within it, must be located. The capsule must be located, perforated, enabling the contents to be released. So we're talking about a release on an energetic level. And through this approach, I've seen enough favorable results to reach the conclusion that working on an energetic level can get down to the core, where the program is, and make a difference. I'd like to talk for a moment about ancestral trauma and illnesses. And in modern times, there are certain diseases that have come about or been given terms that seem to be very difficult to heal. And in this respect, I'd like to speak about for a moment two different illnesses, modern illnesses, and my theory based on the approach, the energetic approach and the release of ancestral trauma. First of all, I'd like to talk about fibromyalgia. Now, this is a disease that produces pain throughout the body. And the cases that I've worked on of women who have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia have had several generations of women in their lineage who had tremendously difficult lives. We're talking perhaps women who had 10 children, the husband left or the husband died, difficult times, women who had to work their fingers to the bone day and night and had to overlook and overcome the physical suffering in order to just keep the kids together, keep the family going. Women who had to endure tremendous suffering, the loss of a child or severe traumas. And what happens is, if a woman has 2 or 3 generations of ancestors who lived this type of life, it's possible that the woman born in modern times can inherit all of this suffering that has not been healed from her lineage. And what would the result be? An unbelievable amount of pain, so much that the body is unable to incorporate it, to deal with it. This inheritance produces a stress factor and a sort of expansion of unresolved pain that just occupies the whole body. I would venture to say that a lot of this pain that women with fibromyalgia suffer from is not their own pain. It is suffering that comes from their ancestors. The other illness that I'd like to discuss is hyper or hypothyroidism. Now, I've had many cases of women suffering from hypothyroidism. And I'll tell you, I'd like to share 2 different actual cases. One was a woman whose grandmother or great-grandmother was in a very difficult predicament. This woman had to guard a very delicate and very disagreeable secret. Her husband had been for many, many years sexually abusing her daughter. And this woman was absolutely dependent economically on her husband. We're talking back in the 1930s. She had to keep the secret. She could not tell anyone. And you can imagine how this was destroying her inside, to having to witness what was going on in her own home and have no power to speak about it or say it or to protect her daughter. So what happens here is the secret, all that was repressed, all the words that were not spoken, all the anger that had to be restricted, created a capsule in the area of the throat. And this capsule can get sent down, can be transmitted from generation to generation. The woman I had been working on had inherited all of this unhealed, unresolved trauma. And what happens is, when that capsule is perforated and released, the energy can flow again easily and effortlessly through the meridians that go through the throat area, through the different organs that produce the voice through the throat itself. And once this energy is flowing again properly, the thyroid gland can relax and can counter and balance once again. And oftentimes the body has its own innate ability to heal. So releasing the capsule, allowing the balance to be restored in that area of the body is often enough for the body's innate healing capacities to be restored and for the organ to become healed and balanced once again. So I'd like to talk about two main objectives when dealing with an energetic approach to healing. The idea of an energetic healing approach is twofold. First, to find where the blocks are in the body, the energetic blocks and the stagnation or the capsules containing the trauma, and to release them. The second aspect of an energetic healing process is the empty spaces, the so-called empty spaces where the capsules were located, are then filled with a higher vibration energy or light. And this is where practices and different methods like Reiki or Shiatsu or many other different energetic healing methods may be applied. So the capsule is removed, and then the body is filled with a higher vibration light. So the idea here is based on two or more of the natural and cosmic laws. There is a natural and cosmic law that states like attracts like. And there's another cosmic law that says what you think automatically has an effect on the world that you create around you. Your thoughts create your reality. So after these capsules, these dense capsules that contain negative charges, density, are released, automatically the body can raise a little bit its own vibration. The light that's then put in through methods or different methods also adds an elevation of the vibration in the body. Now this enables more positive thought forms. The resonance of that individual's body or the energy of that individual's body when it goes out into the world will draw to it situations, opportunities, people that correspond to this new vibration. So that's what we're aiming for here. The other aspect is that when there's density in the body, it's very difficult for the individual to access their full potential because the energy is blocked, there's distortions. So once this is cleared away, the individual is more able to access deeper aspects of their being, their potential, their talents, their gifts. All of this is freed up, and that has a very, very favorable effect on the individual's life. Now, I'd like to mention that, of course, it's a very difficult thing because people might work on their tendencies, resolve their issues, but how do we know what we're carrying within us from our ancestors? I mean, I know that my grandfather or my grandparents were not very keen on talking about their childhood or talking about their past, so most of us really don't know the traumas that might be programmed within us genetically. So the approach that I work on, the method that I offer in my book, Free the Past, Heal the Future, the method that I use in my healing practices and in the workshops that I offer, does not require that the individual know the name of their ancestors, their great-grandparents, their dates of birth, and it doesn't require that they even have information about the traumas that were suffered in their lineage. So it's difficult. How do you know what to work on if you don't have access to this? Once again, we go back to the idea that we're looking for the capsules. What I try to do is find the very first capsule, the very first trauma suffered in the lineage that put into effect a kind of domino effect of tendencies or patterns or dysfunctional psychological aspects that, after that trauma occurred, were transmitted to subsequent generations. So the idea is, if the very first trauma that set all of this in motion is accessed and perforated and released, that automatically has a favorable effect and dilutes the effect of the trauma. So even if I'm working on a particular woman and releasing the trauma that comes from her lineage, this could also reach her daughter or her granddaughter, the daughter or the granddaughter, if they're working on these same themes. So the idea is, either the capsule is there with the charge and the programmation, or when it's removed, it's not there. It sounds very simple, but working on an energetic level, that's basically what I've seen over all these years, the effect that the removal of the capsule and its content has on the individuals. Now I'd like to talk just about a couple of case studies, so maybe I'll give you a clearer idea of how all of this works. I've had many women in these times coming with the problem of trying to conceive a child. And I'd like to share one particular case of the woman and her husband were both given a clean bill of health regarding their reproductive system. There was no problem in their reproductive system that could possibly interfere with them conceiving a child. One woman who came while working, her great-grandmother was in a very difficult situation. She had already 9 children. Once again, it was wartime, poverty, difficult times. She really didn't have enough food to feed her children. She didn't have enough time to even attend to her children. And every time she and her husband had intimate relationships, it ended up in a pregnancy. So thinking back in time, what would a woman in the 1920s, or in a place like Spain, for example, where they're very, very strict religious, traditional philosophy and mindset, what could she possibly do? The only thing that I can imagine is either pray to God not to send her more children, or somehow use her willpower to just stop or put her reproductive system on standby. Now, if this is the case, this leaves, or it can perhaps leave, a sort of decree or mandate in the lineage. And the mandate would basically say, no more children. Is it possible that this mandate, no more children, can be somehow genetically passed along to subsequent generations? In this particular case, that's what was found during the healing. And sometimes when the contents are released from a capsule, images can be seen, or it's information, because there's information contained within the capsules. So information can be seen, or images relating to the story of the trauma being held. In this particular case, the capsule was released. I also suggested to the woman that she do a kind of a little ceremony on her own, in which she declares, in the name of her matriarchal lineage, that any decree or mandate stating no more children, no more pregnancies, be cancelled. So the woman did this ceremony, the capsule was released, and within 1 month she did conceive a child, and she does have her baby now. So, and I could tell you 3 or 4 similar cases with different traumas in the ancestors relating to pregnancies that have also resulted in these women finally conceiving the child that they were seeking to have. Another case was a man who, for the last 30 years, he was 50 years old at the time, had been suffering from severe bouts of anger, uncontrollable rage that would just well up in him in unpredictable moments. So he, in order to function in his everyday life, was taking medication. He was definitely taking some he was taking medication to prevent these bouts of anger. And he also suffered from an overwhelming sensation of guilt. And in his own lifetime, he couldn't remember any memories or events that might have instilled these two emotions within him to such a severe degree. Now, during his session, an image came out when a capsule was perforated from one of his ancestors, and the image was basically a man dressed in what looked like some kind of military clothing, holding a rifle, with a very, very disturbed look on his face. After the healing session, I mentioned this image to the man, and he immediately remembered a story that his father had told him about his great-grandfather. Now, his great-grandfather was a very, very peaceful man. He was a farmer, and it was the times of the Civil War in Spain. He was recruited as a military man, and one particular day, his captain or his general came over to him, handed him a rifle, indicated 5 or 6 men who were standing against a brick wall, and gave him the order to assassinate those 5 men. Now, the great-grandfather had no option except to obey. What his great-grandson, what this man inherited, was a rage at not being able to say, "No, I will not do that." And obviously a sense of guilt that his poor great-grandfather could not heal, could not even address. So when this capsule was released, the man felt immediate relief, because that was the trigger. That was triggering these tremendous, overwhelming emotions of guilt and rage. I'd like to share one more story with you, one more case study. An unusual one. It was a woman in the United Kingdom. And for the last 20 years, she was about 40 years old at the time. For the last 20 years, she had not seen her mother. Her mother lived only an hour away from her in a nearby town. And she had the sense that her mother was embarrassed to be seen in public with her. Even as a young child, she had that feeling. So, and when working on this woman, what came out in the capsule were 2 things. Well, basically it was the image of a very young girl, maybe 15 years old, who was pregnant. And the way her family dealt with that was, in order to punish her and teach her a lesson, was to kind of arrange a situation with the neighbors that they would humiliate her. The young girl would walk around town and people would humiliate her, mock her, make fun of her. And this was the payment, this is her punishment for having gotten pregnant at such a young age. So, this capsule, this trauma of that young ancestor of hers was released, the humiliation, the embarrassment of walking around in public and having people mock her and laugh at her and make fun of her, insult her. That was released. And the most amazing thing occurred. 10 minutes, I kid you not, 10 or 15 minutes after that session with this woman, the telephone rang. And it was her mother. And in a very soft, weak tone, the mother asked her, "Would you like to have a cup of coffee?" So my theory here is that the mother wanted for all these years to contact her daughter, but there was something in her that just blocked her and wouldn't allow her to. The block was released and the mother jumped at the opportunity to call her daughter and reestablish contact. So I don't want to pretend that this is like a magic wand that just comes in and saves the day. That's not the case. But sometimes, in certain occasions, the release of a capsule can have a really significant impact in producing change, healing, or transformation. Now, I'd like to talk for just a moment about long-distance healing. I offer long-distance healing sessions aimed at the release of ancestral trauma. And in the year 2010, June, I worked on a research experiment that was run by Melinda O'Connor PhD. She's with the University of Arizona. And this research project was done with the Optimal Healing Research Center. The project was really interesting. It dealt with each healer received a photograph of a geranium leaf. The geranium leaf was cut from the plant, placed in a pot of soil, given light and water on a daily basis, and our job was 3 times a day for 10 minutes to send that leaf in the photograph healing energy. And this was for a duration for a period of 3 months. So of course there was a controlled geranium leaf cut from the same plant, put in water, given sunlight in another pot, but did not receive the energetic healing treatment. The results after 3 months, an average result was that the leaf that was receiving the energy stayed green and healthy for 50 days. The control geranium leaf withered and died within 10 days. But the interesting thing about this study was there was a surprise factor that they did not tell the healers who were working on the project. After 30 days, they also put an azalea leaf in the same pot where the geranium leaf was receiving the energy treatment, and an azalea, control azalea leaf cut from the same plant in another pot with the same conditions that did not receive the energetic treatment. And this even turned out to be more of a surprise. The results were that the azalea leaf stayed green and healthy for 60 days, and the control azalea leaf died and withered within 10 days. So I'd like to just explain. The healing sessions long distance basically consist of the following. The individual and I set up a time and an hour, a date and a specific hour, in which the individual lies down in a sofa or in their bed for an hour and a half. Beforehand, they send me the information about the themes that they want to work on. They give me their full name, their date of birth, the city where they live, and basically what they want to work on in that session. So at the indicated time and day, I connect with the person, perform the work, and then send them a review. Usually it's about a page or a page and a half review about what was found after the session. Sometimes also give suggestions or ideas or certain strategies that will enable the person to continue to work on the theme being the theme being worked on, to bring it into a complete state of resolution if possible. After the healing session, of course, I check in on the individual maybe once or twice to make sure there are no residues left from the themes being worked on. And I found that over the last, I've been doing this since 1993, that the long-distance healings have the absolute same effect as healings done in person. There's more information on my website page if you're interested, PamelaField.com. There's a lot of information about the long-distance healings. I'd also like to mention that I recently wrote a book called Free the Past, Heal the Future. And what I try to do is, my theme here and my intention is that I believe so strongly that this is such an urgent issue, the release of these ancestral traumas that just don't allow us to evolve as an individual and as a human race. I think the information is so important that what I try to do is put ideas, suggestions, and a method in this book that will enable anyone who reads the book to either use the method presented or modify it to their own belief system or their own healing method. My idea is, for example, if you work with Reiki, if you're an osteopath, if you work with any other method, shiatsu, massage, my intention is to enable you to apply different suggestions that can enable your work to go maybe one step deeper. And that would be to access these capsules and release them. So it makes sense to me that if you've been working for 30 years with Reiki, you should not have to put that aside in order to approach a method that releases ancestral trauma. That makes no sense. keep the Reiki, keep working on what your specialty is, and just find a way to maybe add this step to it. I found that most physical disorders, most illnesses, do not have the root purely in the physical. Usually the root is connected to something energetic, emotional, spiritual even, or mental. So the doctors and the physicians have been trained to address the physical aspects of the body. And alternative healing methods are more focused, or are focused on attending these other aspects of the body. So in my opinion, the two are absolutely compatible, and I believe even perhaps essential for healing to occur. All these areas of the bodies must be addressed. So in the book, I offer individual ideas of how to start healing your own traumas, and especially aimed at therapists to enable them to apply this approach and this focus to your healing methods. I would like once again to mention that in these times, the feeling I have is that we are so evolved. We've been working so hard these past few generations with all the tools available to us, all the focus on evolution and raising our consciousness and healing. We've done so much work. And I wonder sometimes, what's holding us back? Why isn't something just flipping over and showing the results of all these work that our generation and the former generation have been focused on? And the image that comes to my mind is as if, our wings are out there, they're spread, we're ready to just take off in flight, but the ancestral traumas are weighing on us. They're just too heavy, and they're not allowing us to reach this state of freedom and consciousness that we've been working towards. I sometimes wonder, considering that our earliest ancestors, the Australopithecus, according to Columbia University, they lived from 4.1 until 2.7 million years ago. Now, Homo sapien came in, appeared between 10 and 20,000 years ago. So there's a whole long history of primal evolution and primal experience. So I wonder if we are still not even affected by all of these primal fears and traumas. It seems to me that we're still reliving disputes and warfare based on territorial issues. An immense fear of the unknown, or fear of anything that's different to what we're familiar with. All kinds of fears for survival and ensuring that we can survive, and not caring about the others if they can or can't. To me, it just seems like we're repeating these old, ancient, primal fears. So this issue to me is so important that in my book I really suggest and just want to get the information out there as best I can to whoever is interested, to try and make a difference and enable us to kind of free ourselves from repeating the same old stories over and over again. That leads nowhere, and we are heading nowhere if we keep repeating all this stuff. The release of ancestral trauma is a service. It's a service we offer to our ancestors. I like to believe, and I really do believe, that when a trauma is released from one of our ancestors, somehow they can feel the relief, and somehow that this allows them and enables them to reach a state of peace. It's a service especially to our children and to our grandchildren. It's a service to humanity. What better gift can we give to our family? To all our children, our grandchildren, and to all the future generations yet to come. Thank you.